Hey everybody, this is Perch, and there's a lot of news stories going on about the Hellfire Gala happening every year, and the X-Men vote happening every year, and some of these things. So where is this coming from? Well, it's coming from a San Diego Comic-Con panel at home that was apparently filmed sometime back in May, and so it was filmed before these issues were released, and now they've been released, and we're hearing a little bit about it. So let's okay. Let's dig into what was said, right? That's going to be exciting, yeah?
Dun dun dun.
So we're getting an interesting panel here. Basically, we're going to have kind of the equivalent of the showrunner at this point, which appears to be Jerry Duggan, who's kind of the senior man on deck. Jordan White, the editor, is here. Then we have Vita Ayala, we have Ben Percy, and we have Leah Williams. Then we've got our moderator here. No shakes here. But anyway, we introduced the panel, and immediately, like, all of Jordan White's energy comes out right up front.
I am joined by some amazing panelists. Let's rattle them off. First, we have X-Men senior editor Jordan D. White. Hi, Jordan. Hi, Jordan's tie.
Hello. How's it going?
So there was that. So Jordan White, who again is on, has to be a lot of caffeine. He comes in and he talks about the biggest news of the Hellfire Gala. And keep in mind, this is filmed prior to the issues coming out and getting the fan reaction to sales. But basically, the leading headline story is the X-Men terraform Mars. And this whole video, it's an interesting look into kind of how the writers see things and how the X-Office maybe is viewing their own stuff. So it gives you a lot of, I think, interesting insight into the way they think. But here's Jordan White talking about Mars and terraforming Mars and how exciting it is. And it's curious because, I mean, it was a thing, but in a world where planets are routinely destroyed, Wiccan and Hulkling are off ruling the Skrull galaxy, it seems a bit curious that the excitement is so big here.
They terraformed the entire planet of Mars, moved the island of Araco there, renamed it Araco, and guess what? They declared it the capital of the solar system. So they didn't take over the Earth, they took over a different planet.
Okay, so there's that. And I mean, it was a bold-ish movement. Looked beautiful, but the idea of terraforming Mars, I mean, again, we got Forever Gates going on, the Fantastic Four and everything else. We have a new Phoenix host in Echo. It always strikes me with these kinds of things that the editors and writers aren't really reading the other books, because you had a complete alternate reality thing go on with Heroes Reborn, and like I mentioned, a new Phoenix host. We've got Namor causing trouble under the water, and so the idea that I don't know, it's curious. It's always curious to see, and people should be excited about what they do. By the way, I'm not mocking the excitement, maybe a little bit, because Jordan White looks slightly manic and crazy here, but in general. It's when you think about a cohesive Marvel picture, you do this video, and as it sinks in, it's clear that it's not a cohesive picture. But then we get one more bit from Jordan White talking about the other big event from the Hellfire Gala, which is Scarlet Witch's death. And once again, we've seen so much death, particularly within the X-Office itself, that these comments come across as, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, he's acting like, ooh, a very sorrowful moment. You'll see it here, and it's odd.
Yeah. There was one big one, which is that one person who's not even an X character, not even a mutant character anymore, did die, and that is the Scarlet Witch is dead. She died at the Hellfire Gala.
All right, so getting past that, we'll walk away from Jordan White for a little bit. It is this is such a peculiar the stuff I'm looking for, and kind of as you see it, is the interplay between people is just so curious, between White and then Vita Ayala and Ben Percy here and Leah Williams. So Leah Williams comes in to talk about the trial of Magneto and this book that she's writing around that. Now, we're not really referencing the fact that X Factor came to a close, but she's basically going to throw in here. And what's curious here is, I'm wondering how much she was really invested, excited about this book, because as she starts to talk in about kind of exploring House of M and Trial has more meetings, it's like it kind of loses the plot a little bit. It's an odd. this is an odd little pitch for the book, but very much on brand. If you've never been to a comic convention, this is exactly how a lot of the panels sound and go. So not a knock against against Leah, but a little peculiar here.
So it's a murder investigation. And obviously Wanda has made a lot of enemies in Krakoa, whether or not she intended to. It's just kind of a, byproduct of her traumatic past. So this is a really deep look into the proceedings of, Krakoa's first, really high profile murder investigation that brings a lot of outside attention and threatens a lot of Krakoan secrets, a lot of Krakoan peace. And it's also a deep look into, the House of M dynamic. It's called Trial of Magneto, and trial has more than one meaning. It's trials and tribulations as well.
Okay, I mean, see what I mean? It's anyway. But here's where it gets interesting. So the next comment from Jerry Duggan is talking specifically about these plans for more Hellfire Galas. And this is what all the news pages are written. So this is where I want you to just see for yourself. This is actually what was said. Keep in mind, this came up before, certainly before you've seen sales figures for the Hellfire Gala. So none of these people talking know how it's done or how well it's going to do. And I think there's a big difference between, we could do this every year and it will happen every year. Is it going to happen with 12 issues crossing over to it? I have a really hard time believing that that's ever going to happen again in the same way. Will they do it again? Are they going to do a Hellfire Gala every year? Maybe. Are they going to do an X-Men vote every year? Maybe. I have a feeling like that's going to, if you think about it too, if it sticks to a monthly schedule, which it hasn't been, we're talking every 12 issues we're going to do a vote. Like, yikes. I don't know. We'll see how it all goes. But anyway, here is all the articles that were written are based on this exact next statement. Listen to it for yourself.
Yeah, and the interesting way that we're going to do this from now on is the interesting thing is we'll have a yearly Hellfire Gala with a new elected team, perhaps. And if your favorite isn't on the X-Men, it's because you let that character down. That's you didn't vote hard enough.
Personally responsible.
It's your fault.
Jerry.
All right. So, yeah. So I don't think it's anything is set in stone, certainly. But, definitely that this is a direction I think he'd like to go into. How enthusiastic the other people are on the panel about this, who knows? Definitely there's, Vita's made some comments about, it's good to rub the human's nose in it a little bit, which feels a little bit telling maybe about where Vita's head's at. But anyway, we get into a little bit of, we barely touch on maybe fan reaction. Will fan reaction be bad? And they come at it from the sense of, are fans going to be upset because their mutants weren't on the team? And there's some self-awareness here that there's been some negative reaction to some of the X books. So Duggan basically comes in and starts talking about how, it's kind of similar to a comment he made, a couple months ago, saying we write for ourselves. It's on that same vein. It is, basically he's stressing the point that, the other writers and the kind of the conversations in the X Slack have toughened him up, that he can withstand any kind of fan criticism, and it just rolls right off his back. So he's not going to care, which does seem to be the prevailing attitude within the X Slack office. And we're going to get into more of what the X Slack and that whole community looks like. But this little quote here, I think, is pretty telling, I guess, of the mentality right now.
There's no amount of grief that the fans can throw at me that I either heap upon myself or get from my collaborators in the X office. So I'm coming to you, it's like training in Denver and then going to the lowlands to compete, like there's nothing anybody can do to hurt me anymore.
Okay. And yeah, it's hard. It's a hard not. On one hand, it's true. We've talked about this a lot on the channel with other things. Certainly as a writer, you got to write, what you know, and you got to do your best, and you can't get too myopic about worrying about every fan opinion. But there's something about hey, your criticisms are going to roll off my back kind of tone that always it's the wrong it sends the wrong message. It sends a disconnected message, even if partially it's true. And maybe it's not even, we don't know. But it comes off odd, and it came off odd there. But the conversation segues into the Slack itself, which is this basic planning area. I mean, Slack is a tool. You can go in there and create message boards and other things that are private. It's kind of the precursor or the successor to Google Docs, which a lot of people used and some still do in making comics, but Slack's a bit more organized. And the Slack has turned into this mythological thing where creators desperately want to be part of it, and it's considered this huge honor to be part of it. The crazy part, though, is you could set up a Slack right now. Any of us could. It's cheap, meaning it's free in most cases. You can pay for a tier on Slack that costs, very little. It's weird to see people find it. But anyway, Leah Williams starts talking about Slack and the community and how they interact with each other. And for the first time, the group gets more animated. Other than Jordan White, who was just spazzing out all along, but this is it. There's clearly a Slack is all important kind of feeling that you're starting to pick up here, where this is really the clubhouse of the group, not the comics, the Slack. And they go into a little story here, and it's like, again, everybody gets very animated about it.
I want to remember this for the rest of my life. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And I think most recently, there was this day when Jerry caught a guy trying to mess with his wife's car in the driveway. So he came out and threatened this guy with a shillelagh. And when Vito was like, "Why do you have a shillelagh?" Jerry was like, "Don't need to reload a shillelagh." And this is the same day that Jonathan Hickman got a wrong number. There it is. There's the shillelagh.
There it is.
Yes, the famed shillelagh.
Yeah, I'm not these. I hate these people who are like, they shouldn't have fun. They should make comics. Of course, they should have fun. But it is like the Slack of there's for lack of a better word, there's almost a Slack obsession in some cases that come across here, and it's odd. I will say this may be a case where the creators, people involved here, do not realize how odd it comes across. And as we go into other comments here about what it means to be the X-Men, and what it means to be kind of this community, it feels like nobody here is kind of has a self-awareness to understand that when you're talking about a private Slack group and these private jokes, and kind of the most fun you have is, as Leah said, the most fun you're having is, in this private group. And then you segue to talking about how the X-Men are about inclusion and bringing the community closer together. But then when you go back to talking about this group that only you're a part of, it's like there's a little bit of a, do you realize how you're sounding here? You're sounding maybe not like you intend to sound. But anyway, we go away from that and we go over to Vita, and they start talking about the Shadow King and kind of what it means to be a Shadow King. Kind of like Leah Williams, you start to wonder why Vita has this impression of the Shadow King. It's their view of the Shadow King seems slightly askew to maybe people who have read the comics all along to the Shadow King.
To me, he makes sense in a New Mutants book for two reasons. One, that's a callback. He's classically a New Mutants villain, right? Like, he's been messing with these kids since the 80s. It's been a really long, hard road. But I think that, for me, he represents a kind of boogeyman that an adult might not believe, right? So you have all of these mutant kids that are just running around. No one's paying attention to what they're doing.
I'll just throw in there that nobody's paying attention to what they're doing in the readers either, based on the sales. But I'm sorry, that was a cheap shot. But anyway, let's continue.
They're just getting into trouble, right? They just set them free. They're like, go have fun. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to do anything. And what kind of trouble, what's waiting for young, impressionable minds, right? Like, he's a predator. That's what he does. But I also think that one of the things that we're trying to do with him is to make him more understandable. I don't want to say relatable. I don't want to say a good guy ever. But I think the biggest danger is the one that seems almost reasonable, especially to children, right? Like, not children, but like kids, teenagers, like.
So with the comic storytelling done, we heard a little bit from Ben Percy and others. I mean, you should go check this out. It's up and available on YouTube and other places. You can stream this here at all for yourself. It's a longish show. I'm just showing you some highlights. But the conversation then heads over to kind of what is the purpose of the X-Men? What kind of are their priorities? And watch how Vita starts talking about the priorities of the X-Men. But then the whole thing kind of very quickly detours to, once again, kind of the X-Slack, the X-Writers, and kind of this fairly, segmented group. There's a lot of very kind of odd word trickery here, where you're talking about kind of building a community and, thinking not having, basically not having exclusion, not telling people, this isn't for you. Which is very curious given some of the statements have been made. But basically that, there's bigger fish to fry, there's bigger things to do, there's a bigger world, and we need to include everyone in it. I'm not sure they mean, classic comic fans, but anyway, they go into, and here comes this bit, first Vita, then Leah, talking about kind of what the X-Men are all about, and then we get into kind of, it very quickly goes to, this is what I'm getting out of it. This is what the group we are involved in are doing.
I think it touches on the idea that mutants are trying to make everything habitable and good, right? Like, it's not, there is no us versus them, because they've reached such a high level that it's like, now we can worry about the big problems for everyone. If y'all want to squabble about stuff, that's fine, but we got bigger fish to fry. So
for me, my first answer would have been exactly what Vita said about community building and about how important that is to Krakoan life, because it's also something that I feel reflected through being a part of the X Office, and it's been, really life-changing for me, having a peer group of such amazing colleagues. But
yeah, I mean, it's very clear, I mean, from videos like this, and what the surprising, I guess, part to me is it's nakedly on display that this is a group, tight-knit writers, which isn't a bad thing. But, the amount of reinforcement about our Slack, our stories, our jokes, our peers, it's really set up as a very, like they moved in, they put on these books, and they put up giant gates to protect kind of their place. And the people who come in have to make all these writers happy. It's a very different kind of style for Marvel, and how it pulls out, how it works out over time. It's hard to say, but it is like people burrowed in, and now it's this is ours. You do get a lot of that. Leah does continue on a little bit with one other thing that she believes X-Men books are about, and that's healing through trauma, which is insightful. That's not what I would go to, but it is clearly what Leah is going to, and it is clearly what Leah plans for the X-Men and kind of her involvement in it, and at the crux of people who are having to face down their traumas. But it explains a lot about why the books are kind of doing what they're doing, and why there's so many storylines that seem to go into maybe current social issues, LGBTQ issues. There's a certain amount of therapy. The X-Men books are therapy. We've joked around that the X-Men are a cult now, but it's the in a weird way, the cult is the group working on it, and the comics are about it's about therapy. I think that's really hammered home in many comments from everyone. This is these are therapy comics.
One of the things that I hope is carried forward through Krakoan storytelling is this theme of healing from trauma, because we see it in...
All right, so really only one last clip. Again, I find all this insightful and to look into the minds of kind of these people, and I do think it explains a little bit, both what we expect, a little bit what we didn't. But we get, a last word here will be by Jerry Duggan himself, and he's talking about the X-Men, and he's talking a little bit about Sunfire and kind of why people are doing what they're doing. And again, he hits a note that Leah Williams hit, and a little bit that Vita hit, around, thinking about more than yourself, about bringing more people in, about how it needs to be inclusive, about how, you can't leave people behind. And I contrast that with it's an interesting outlook of what they're trying to do with the comics, while there's a lot of claims and criticisms about leaving fans behind.
One of the things too in X-Men that we're doing is we're going to flash back to the gala for just one or two panels for each character, and you're going to hear why they wanted to be on the X-Men team. And this month actually is Sunfire's turn to talk about that a little bit. And it's not a spoiler if you haven't read it yet, but one of the ideas is, what are you prepared to do to serve Krakoa or serve this planet that we live on? And he answers very truthfully as someone who has had multiple answers to that question over the years. And so his journey is reflected in that. And I think it's really fun. Hey, what are you willing to do to not just serve Krakoa, but serve the whole world?
Well, so there you have it. I watched it, so you didn't have to. Isn't that nice? I'm here for you. I'm trying to be here for you. Anyway, it's some interesting analysis, kind of reactions to some of these comments and statements. I do think it's an interesting look into people, and it's very curious. But anyway, let me know your thoughts, and in the comments below. It's like I said, I watch it so you don't have to. But if you do want to watch it, if you want to look completely for yourself, I do encourage you to go do that. Jump right in and give that a shot. And yeah, interesting stuff. Just, final thoughts. This doesn't make me feel great about the future of the X-Men, bluntly. This isn't, trauma and some of the things you're saying. I mean, in many ways, it's curious because the comments of looking out for more than yourself, very heroic comments, that is what I would want to see in the comics. But the brand here of looking inward to healing traumas and all that, it's odd. And I am struck by the fact that several of the writers do seem to have a very odd view of the X-Men. It's like they started reading X-Men books, they read some of the Grant Morrison books, and they ignored it for a while, and now they're in this group, and they're kind of their memories of what was going on seem they seem kind of by nature of maybe what people are saying on social media about what happened during these time periods, but they're not accurate. So it's curious. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below about where all this is going. Hopefully this was helpful. And like and subscribe as always, and thanks for listening.